So let's do this. Who are we talking about today? Why am I holding this? Who knows? It's the return of Call from the Grave. And today we're talking about Morbid Angel. Probably, possibly, let's be honest, the greatest death metal band of all time. Maybe not the most consistent, but we'll get into that. And what I'm going to do is go over, I suppose, the band's career, talk about all the different records, all that kind of stuff. Some I have, some I don't seem to have, some I appear to have lost. Of course, I'm, as usual, super prepared. But yes, this is the return of Call from the Grave, and this is Morbid Angel. First off, yes, this is a Thy Kingdom Come original demo shirt. It's from the top shelf of fuck you, you don't have these heavy metal elitist t-shirts. And god damn it, of course I was going to wear it if I'm going to talk about Morbid Angel. And no, I don't have an original Thy Kingdom Come demo cassette to show you. Throughout all the years, most of my cassettes have gone missing somewhere. I blame my mother for probably putting them on eBay. Who knows? Anyway, so no, there aren't loads of cassettes. I used to have tons and tons of Morbid Angel bootleg cassettes. That was kind of like a thing to collect back in the day, tape trading, as many different bootlegs as possible from 85, 86, 87. And some of them were just incredible. Some of them were entirely well worth tracking down, of course. For some reason I bought this Morbid Angel bootleg not so long ago, 1985, live at the Power Company. Pretty interesting stuff. I mean, most people don't realize Morbid Angel started in 84, I think. And this one has all sorts of songs. I mean, let me read you the track list. Abominations, Call of the Night, Covens of the Dancer, Morbid Angel, Maze of Torment, Bring in the Blood, Demon Dance, Welcome to Hell. Very odd that you would name a song Welcome to Hell, post Welcome to Hell. Necro Metal, love that title. Dead Zone, Doomed by the Living Dead. Indeed, a Merciful Fate cover stuck at the end. Yeah, it doesn't sound amazing, but it's, you know, it's a pretty tasty bootleg. There used to be the thing back in the day to collect as many bootlegs as possible of Morbid Angel and listen to them religiously. So there is like an awful lot of backstory to Morbid Angel that exists before Altars of Madness, which is probably one of the reasons why by the time they hit Altars of Madness, the band was such a fine honed weapon, so to speak, because they'd spent 5 years preparing for making that fucking record. So what prompted this is I got an email in my inbox and it said, what is the greatest heavy metal debut of all time? What is the greatest heavy metal debut of all time? Heavy metal now, not Black Sabbath, for example. Now, of course, this answer can change month to month, year to year, but the standard answers over the last few decades are Iron Maiden, Melissa, obviously, Wasp, debut Wasp, yep, no doubt, Welcome to Hell, Morbid Tales, Epicus, Doomicus, Metallicus. But today, during this email thread, which I think was in Deaf Forever magazine, shout out to Deaf Forever. This chair is getting kind of squeaky. That's not going to sound good on a podcast, is it? Anyway, Altars of Madness today is my answer. Altars of Madness. And when you really think about it, it very well could be, right? I mean, it's arguably the greatest death metal album of all time. Maybe if you've grown up on the more modern sort of death metal, I don't know what you would call it. For me, it's kind of stop-starty, down-tuned, modern sort of compressed death metal. You might have a completely different attitude. I don't know, really. I mean, oddly enough, I just watched Gatekeeper play live, and all the dudes are wearing Demolish, Autopsy, Morbid Angel, and Tomb shirts. Dismember. Crowd is quite different, a bit more hardcore, but for sure, the new dudes get the old style. Not to place myself nearer to the age of Morbid Angel than the age of the guys from Gatekeeper. I imagine I'm probably nearer their age. However, that's neither here nor there, really, isn't it? But if you ask me, the trifecta of death metal is probably Altars of Madness, Deicide, and Mental Funeral. Although that could be forced out of the third place into fourth place, and there ain't no medal for third place, by Seven Churches. You know, those are, but for many, many years, Altars of Madness, Deicide, and Mental Funeral have been the trifecta. But is it really the debut? Or is this really the debut? Abominations of Desolation. It's hard to say because back in the day, this is from 1986, did it never really kind of sort of did or didn't come out in the original, the very, very original intention, which I think was David Vincent had a Gork Records or something. He formed a label to release the record because he wasn't even the band yet. It's got Mike Browning of Nocturnus, Acheron fame on it. Shout out to Mike, who I also book some gigs for, by the way, in case you want to book Nocturnus. It's neither here nor there. Did it not really kind of come out? Shubna Gorath, the goat with 1,000 young. This is a Japanese Satanic Records, 1991, licensed from Gork Records, Charlotte, North Carolina, printed in Japan. So this, I mean, it's hard. Some probably Morbid Angel fans are screaming at me in the void, saying this was not the original one, etc., etc. I mean, the story is, of course, the cover artwork by Lucifer. It's nice that he, took some time out of his day of taking over the world or whatever he's been doing to do the artwork. I mean, I probably should have read this whole explanation at the back. But anyway, this is 1986. And legend has it, as I said, that David Vincent put together the label to release the record. And this is very, very extreme. I mean, for 86, most, just like some of the more mainstream heavy metal labels weren't sure what to do with Death yet. They weren't sure what to do with Master, with Repulsion. There were some heavy metal, or there were some death metal albums from 86 that were recorded that never quite got released. I mean, if you've got a version of Repulsion, Horrified, so the story is they tried to shop this around to labels, but it wasn't released until the Carcass guys got a side label on Earache Records, that kind of thing. Ever met anyone with the original? Shut the fuck up. Ever met anyone with the original? I don't think I ever have. Like I said, I have a feeling this is one of the first or second. It's probably not the first versions. What the fuck? It's called living in a big city. These are the things you watch YouTube for. Anyway, I have one version. This is no doubt a bootleg, but this is an absolutely incredible album. Does it really count as the first or the debut album of Morbid Angel? It was the grail of tape trading back in the day. I mean, I made my own cover, when I was a kid. My copy is ... out of 1,000. There, haven't managed to scribble in what number my copy is. And this is before Pete Sandoval. This is before David Vincent were in the band. Shame on Earache for changing the classic original artwork. You've probably seen this as the kind of weird sort of side of a ship, sort of steel-looking album on Earache Records. But if you listen to it on Spotify or whatever, it is still the same version. Hunting down this version, I'm sure there are many, many bootlegs since this version. But this is a pure, nasty, evil, vile record. I mean, it's so fucking brutal. Unholy Blasphemies, Chapel of Ghouls opening after the invocation of the Iaksaka will just warp your fucking mind. And this is before, as I can understand it, the Thy Kingdom Come demo, which is maybe the greatest death metal demo of all time. There's no doubt about it. And this is you could tell what was going to happen. If you listen to the album, I mean, the songs are slower. They haven't picked up into blast beats really yet. This is still sort of somewhere between Possessed and Venom style death metal. But Lord of All Fevers and Plagues, Hellspawn, Abominations, Demon Seed, Welcome to Hell. Anyway, maybe I should ask Mike Browning what's going on with it. But yeah, if you can track it down, or just listen to the original or the version on Spotify. This is a clear, well, it's not really clear, it's a sort of pissy yellow vinyl, which is kind of apt. But is this really the debut? It's very hard to say because it was really just a tape trading debut, I think, in 1986. If you have the original Gork Records one, well then maybe let me know in the comments, or just, you know, find it and send it to me. But it's hard to really underestimate the influence of this when it came out. By the first thing I should mention is that I don't really like the cover. I mean, I know it's Dan Seagrave at his best, but even at 14, I found it too much like it's too goofy. I found it a bit, these little weird smiley faces always irritated me even when I was 14. This is the proper cover of Altars of Madness, and it should be, and that's what's on the inside, and then the lyric sheet. It just sort of irritated me because it was too goofy, which betrays what an absolutely fucking violent and brutal record this is. The difference, of course, Pete Sandoval joins from Terrorizer and the band Step Up the Blasting. You'll notice, of course, this is Tom Morris in Morris Sound. And this was always a very clever thing Morbid Angel did. They didn't record with Scott Burns. Maybe this is a bit before Scott Burns. Well, Scott Burns did Slowly Rot in the same year and made an amazing job of that. But Slowly Rot is quite different from where he went afterwards with his productions. But Tom Morris seemed to have more of a, this is a proper kind of like, it's a very hard drum sound, but it's a hard rock influenced drum sound. Like it's a big bass drum, big snare, which was not really the Morris Sound way. But is this the greatest death metal album of all time? I would say, yeah. This is, I mean, hearing this for the first time was just sort of like everything just stepped up a level. Everything. You were trading demos, you were trading whatever. A big album before this was Pestilence, Malleus Maleficarum, which is 88, which is a year before this, and that was more kind of black thrash, death thrash. But that's a huge record for me, along with Leprosy and of course Scream Bloody Gore. Death Row already had 2 albums ahead by this stage, but Morbid Angel was probably the most tape traded band. You had the split 7-inch with Slaughter Lord, all that kind of thing. But is this possibly the greatest just heavy metal debut of all time? And I include Iron Maiden and Merciful Fate in that. It's very, very possible. It was just, I mean, if you had this, getting the CD of it at the time gave you like 3 or 4 extra tracks, including the incredible Lord of All Fevers and Plagues, which for some reason only appeared on the CD. I suppose that was just the purpose at the time, to try and make people buy the CD, as if that really needed to be done. But Immortal Rites, Suffocation, Visions from the Dark Side, Maze of Torment, Chapel of Ghouls, Bleed for the Devil, Damnation, Blasphemy, Evil Spells. I mean, even just the other day, I tried to play along with Chapel of Ghouls on the bass and then went, come on, really? What are you doing? Know your limits. And then if you go and watch Morbid Angel live at Nottingham Rock City, I think in 89 on the Grindcrusher tour, they're a force of nature. I mean, it's absolutely incredible. If Slayer had taken them out in 89, they would have really pushed Slayer and probably give them a fucking bitch slap a few nights. It's just incredible. Maybe, I think, one of the greatest live death metal footage of any band. And for me, this is arguably probably the greatest death metal album of all time. And so you give it full marks. There's no other way around it. Like I said, at the time, it really dropped like a bombshell on the scene. I suppose 89 is also Severed Survival, which is a huge body blow as well. But this was just a kind of other level evil. Classic Vincent pose on the back, Trey on the other side with the inverted cross that I think he got lasered off at some stage. Pete Sandoval, if you listen to the version of Chapel of Ghouls from Abominations, and then you listen to the version from Altars of Madness, you can hear the big step up in musicianship. You've got proper blasting and all that kind of stuff. And yeah, I mean, it just set out a bar so high that, I mean, realistically, the band never quite. I mean, it's arguable, but I think that's the greatest Morbid Angel album. But it's got some very stiff competition. By 1990, 89, 1991, I was all over tape trading, writing letters to everybody. And because of all the Morbid Angel bootlegs that I'd got before Altars of Madness had come out, I'd heard Abominations. You'd heard more or less all of side 2 of Blessed Are the Sick. The rumor goes that Blessed Are the Sick was recorded as an EP, which is only side 1, because all side 1 is new songs. But all of side 2 is old songs. Thy Kingdom Come, Tone, Unholy Blasphemies, Abominations, Desolate Ways, kind of beautiful acoustic guitar piece. I think the only thing that Richard Brunel wrote for Morbid Angel. The Ancient Ones, and then the throwaway silly piano exit. But I remember talking to a friend of mine when it came out, and back then you would go into the record shop knowing today is the day Blessed Are the Sick comes out. And I remember it came into the record shop in Dublin the same day as Mental Funeral, and the pull of looking at the two records on the wall, going, which do I have enough money for? Trying to count out your coins, and saying to my mate, well, you have enough money for Mental Funeral. I got to buy a cassette tape extra, and I'll buy Blessed Are the Sick. And you go home, and then you tape each other, and you spent like all week like just listening to Blessed Are the Sick over and over again. I remember talking to some a friend of mine, guy still a friend of mine. We're listening to in the record shop, going, wow, all these songs I know on side 2, and then you realize, like, oh, not everyone tape trades. But I think it was meant to be an EP. And then Earache told them, you have to flesh this out. Either way, Bless Our Sick is masterful. It's very modern sounding for the time of 91, with a drum sound that's something of a precursor to the late 90s. Up front, kind of airless click, very compressed sort of drum sound. It's a touch less caustic and violent, and actually natural sounding than Notes of Madness, but it's a very dark sidestep. And I remember MTV doing the premiere of the Blessed Are the Sick video, and it really being, we thought as 16, 17, this is really pushing the boundaries, and there was even boobs in it, and it really set Morbid Angel kind of on a different trajectory. And you can see now, looking back, you heard other bands, other death metals at the time, kind of slagging them a bit for their seeming infatuation with their own image. But at the time, the band photos with all of them sort of, with kind of women a la Ken Kelly, Manowar, Kiss at their feet, kind of, which you probably wouldn't get away with now. But at the time, we were 16, 17, going, my God, look at these serious guys. And the piano intro is perhaps the only blemish on this record, which is altogether silly and needless. 2 lyric sheets, for some reason I don't just notice that now. Why do I just notice that now after all these years? Anyway, yeah, Blessed Are the Sick is quite a... Black metal at the time was just clambering up the sort of steep mountainside of 1991, and many of us were, 1990, end of 89, 1991, we're starting to hear Master's Hammer, Samael, Rotting Christ, Varathron, these kind of bands, Beherit, Blasphemy, etc. And that was beginning to take our, I suppose, attention span as in terms of the underground, because most of the death metal bands were starting to release albums now. And that was just sort of taking them out of the underground into the sort of, we'll call it the overground for sake of purposes. But the black metal was still about tape trading. And tape trading was such a kind of lifestyle choice, in a sense, that we sort of, once a band had released an album, it's sort of like, fly my children, be free. And you sort of felt like you'd done your part in tape trading. When Dawn of Possession came out by Immolation, you thought, well, maybe there's someone somewhere who has bought this because I tape traded, the Immolation Demo 88 or Demo 89, of which they push the Morbid Angel demo is very close. And it's if somebody could re-release Stepping on Angels Before Dawn on vinyl, I would be very happy. And that's the Immolation demo compilation. That's my personal request. But black metal was climbing up the mountainside to kind of kick death metal a bit into touch by 1992. Just like death metal had kind of done to thrash. I think most people don't really realize, but thrash by the end of 1990, 91, even though Clash of the Titans was like the big, Slayer Megadeth tour, it felt like it'd run out of steam. At least to me, it wasn't capturing my attention anymore. I'd kind of left the building with half of Seasons in the Abyss, songs like Blood Red, dinky riffs, not my thing. Especially when you were sitting on listening to Master's Hammer or something, and Morbid Angel just came along and just went to most of the thrash stuff. And made listening to, I'm not going to say names, but like if you what would you listen to rather listen to Autism Madness or practice what you preach? If you're an angry 15-year-old, Autism Madness, right? Yeah, okay. So, Morbid Angel, this Blessed Heart Sick, I would still give it almost full marks, or full marks. It's incredible. Oddly enough, it's the same cover as Hexenhaus from Sweden, where Mike Weed, who plays in Merciful Fate, came from. I think he was in Memento Mori as well. It's pure nerdisms. They use the same artwork, which is very strange. If you can track down Hexenhaus, I'm not really sure what the album is called, but their version of it is a bit less pink. But anyway. So, but black metal had been ascending to the throne to try and, dethrone death metal. And by 1992, the landscape had really changed. And oddly enough, 1992 was a year Morbid Angel, had seemed to take off. 1992. They'd been touring. I think they'd played even some shows as a three-piece. Now, this is the kind of, what would you say? Let me just move that there. I bought this on cassette for some reason back in the day, 1993, and I think it was because the vinyl didn't come into the shop properly, and it's on those small decisions you don't end up with an original Covenant like the normal vinyl. This is just picture disc version of it. And black metal was just obsessing our mental space, but Covenant, which I also give full marks to, this was like, this just blew my fucking mind when I first heard it. The look of disbelief on all of us gathered in that same record shop when Rapture rolls out like the heavy artillery, jaws dropped. We didn't expect this from Morbid Angel because our headspace was just a blaze in the northern sky and all this kind of stuff. We kind of went, maybe death metal feels a bit done. But when Rapture rolled in, if you told me this was the best Morbid Angel album, I would also hear this argument. They made a genius move of getting Flemming Rasmussen, who did Ride the Lightning, a Master of Puppets, to engineer in Denmark. And that gives this album a really natural tone. It has an incredible guitar tone, incredible drum sound, which was where a lot of purists at the time were heading towards. Scott Burns' production by 1992, I think the scene was kind of rebelling against what his production represented. You listened to Butchered at Birth maybe at the time, and I listened to quite a lot of Cannibal again during lockdown and found, a newfound respect for them because I'd sort of filed them away for the last 20 years under, don't really care about this kind of death metal, but there is something sick about that old stuff. But Butchered at Birth, to me, it sounds like it needs a facelift of a remaster. The drum sound is very kind of small, and I think the scene was reacting against some of the Scott Burns production, Malevolent Creation, Retribution, I think, at the same time as well. Whereas Morbid Angel with Covenant went away, totally the other way, and Covenant flexes a muscle that I think few bands at the time could think about doing. It was super vital, energetic, backed up with some incredible videos, because I think Morbid Angel signed to a major label at the time. Covenant is an absolute tour de force, and it has, Angel of Disease, which is a very, very old song where they seem to tune back up again, or at least it sounds like to my dumb ears. But like it's God of Emptiness, where Vincent shows us he has a singing voice. Vengeance is Mine. Lion's Den, which is one of the few music that Dave Vincent seems to have written, if my memory is not incorrect. But Rapture, Pain Divine, The Downtuned World of Shit. Incredible. Absolutely incredible. Arguably, I would say for me, I prefer this to Blessed Are the Sick. So, again, full marks. And one of the most incredible vocal performances. Got to give this to Vincent. It's one of the things about modern death metal that sometimes leaves me on the shore when it's just, but there's no diction. Like Vincent is almost like the Dio of death metal singing. Every word you can hear without a lyric sheet. And for me, that's something I always try to emulate with my own singing in Primordial, was to make every word understood. And Vincent's vocal performance on this, kind of untouchable in terms of death metal. It's just inflected with every part of the nuance. The delivery is just impenetrable. And then this Urbane Grandeur, Pact with the Devil cover. Yeah, pretty cool. I don't have one thing I don't have on vinyl is Domination. This was a time, 1996, I guess, where I was buying mostly CDs. Most people don't realize how kind of out of the loop vinyl became in the sort of mid-90s. It didn't really become like a fad again until later on in the 90s. But this again is a fucking brilliant album. I think this cover sucks, to be honest with you. I think it's garish and kind of like early Photoshop sort of artwork. Doesn't stand the test of time. It's kind of like a Def Leppard video or something, and sort of rather natty band photos in the back. But this is a very clever album, and at the time they went on tour with Immortal in Europe, which was a very, very big deal because they were sort of giving the nod to black metal, and they showed that they were Morbid Angel, Immortal, and Moonspell, I think, opened. And they were a little nod doff of the cap to black metal. As I mean, it does say on the inside of Ultimate Madness to black death metal, blah, 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 heads everywhere. So it's not like they weren't, how shall we say, had one foot in hell or one foot in the black metal camp, so to speak. Black metal camp, that sounds ominous. But this has Eric Rutan on it as well from Hate Eternal, who contributed some cool riffs and some cool bits to it. But this one, that once again sees Morbid Angel kind of sidestep the trends of the time. Like, it's a bit like Blessed or Sick. It has quite a digital footprint. But if you listen now, it doesn't sound as dated as some digital albums of the time. The tone, it all kind of fits into place. And Vincent, again, proving himself in a category of maybe one, or at least two or three for the greatest death metal vocalist of all time. It's an inspired, darker, and more modern sounding record. And there was a sampler, I think, with Terrorizer magazine at the time, which opened with Dominate. And none of us could quite believe when we first heard Dominate. It was so brutal and the lyrics were so extreme. It really sort of reset Morbid Angel in terms of, again, the sort of nascent black metal scene. 96, of course, is where, Cradle and Dimmu are starting to explode, and you've got all these other kind of bands. And Morbid Angel could compete. Again, I would give it almost full marks. And it shows us those four albums are arguably the greatest four death metal, sort of, let's say, passage of time, the greatest run of albums I think you could possibly find. Very few bands can stand up to that. Maybe someone like Immolation is more consistent over all of the years. I mean, consistently really good. But those four are stellar. Now, for some reason, I cannot find my copy of Formulas Fatal to the Flesh, so I will bring it up here as a little square. Vincent leaves. Let me just say, after Domination, Vincent leaves, and a sort of acrimonious fallout with Trey, which will replay itself again over the next coming 20, 25 years. And personally, I don't think we've seen the last of it. You'll notice Morbid Angel haven't played in Europe over the last couple of years since Vincent left. Why? Who knows? But Vincent has been making hay while the sun shines, doing his I Am Morbid tours and playing those old albums. And it sort of feels like if Morbid Angel want to have one last, trip around the sun or whatever, they're going to have to realign once more. And so I don't think it's beyond maybe a year or two, 2024, you're going to get maybe Morbid Angel one more time. I don't know. Rumor starts here. Anyway, Formulas Fatal to the Flesh, which I cannot find. I didn't have it on vinyl. I had it on CD. Formulas is an absolutely astonishing record. It's 1998. And I would take it at 0.5 of a mark off from full marks. And perhaps I'm being a little bit churlish for penalizing it for not being Covenant. But if you set your own bar so high, then them's the breaks, hey? But on its own terms, Formulas is one of the greatest comebacks, stroke, we've lost our singer, fuck you, albums of all time. of all time in metal. Oddly enough, the singing is perhaps the most insignificant element, which is really odd, considering how much I've been extolling the virtues of the Vincent enunciation. Formulas doesn't have that. Formulas is a much more of a, I suppose, a kind of slightly typical death metal gurgle voice, you know. Gurgle, what a word. Anyway, this is where Trey stepped up to the plate. Trey decided, I think, to step up and show how to serve up a dish best served cold, or whatever you want to say. The revenge on display, the rewenge, the hunger and fire in the belly of the riffs is off the fucking dial. It's an absolutely insane record. Nothing is not. My God, it's just, if you've sort of not bothered with this record because you're enthralled to the old, the old early Morbid Angel, you need to listen to this record. It's absolutely incredible. However, Formless Fate to the Flesh would be, I think, the last great Morbid Angel album. Gateways, which I also don't seem to own. I think I do somewhere. Did I have it on CD? I don't know. Those are both two records are missing from my CD collection. Gateways and Formulas, which I must, if I'd been a bit more organized and a bit more Northern European and Teutonic about my organizational skills, I might have found them and filtered through hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of CDs, possibly even 1,000 or something, looking for them. But I thought I can illustrate with a little picture taken from the images and don't need to discuss it. Gateways is an album I found very difficult to warm to at the time. It felt and still feels like Trey had kind of clocked out of Morbid Angel, shot his load on Formulas, and rumor has it doesn't play even some of the rhythm guitar parts on this. I think it was the time that he was obsessed with gaming, and it seems this took up most of his mental space at the time. The tempo is slower. The opening 2 or 3 tracks are without a doubt strong game, but if you can remind me of the last 2 or 3, what they are, the titles, I don't know them. Do you? Yeah, nor I. And that sort of says a lot about Gateways. It's a good record. It's a swampy, dirgy record. It's a strong 7 out of 10 or something like this. And it like I said, it opens with 1 or 2 of the pretty cool tracks, but there's something lacking in the ferocity of it, and you can hear that that's just seemingly Trey kind of clocked out. Heretic I don't own. The next album, Heretic. I hope I'm not rushing through them here, but Heretic, I should mention, of course, that Steve Tucker was the replacement for Vincent if I didn't, but Heretic, I would give a 5 out of 10 maybe. It's an afterthought. The musical landscape has changed, and by 2003, Morbid Angel were not really the force in the metal scene they once were. Death metal was sort of more about Nile, I suppose, at the time, and other bands were taking their place in the ascendancy. The older death metal bands were sort of fading. New Kids on the Block, not New Kids on the Block, but there were New Kids on the Block, and a poorly produced Morbid Angel album. The engineering is poor. It sounds like an afterthought. Little or no memorable tunes. It wasn't going to do much for them. Jared Anderson from Hate Eternal took over from Tucker for a short period. I'm going to be honest, the band sort of seems in disarray. Primordial played with them around this time, and I remember Trey, as soon as I think they arrived the day before, we played with them in Dublin with Primordial, and the day before, Trey found an internet cafe to play Doom, which he was obsessed with, the video game, and he just played all day Doom until they closed the shop, and the next morning was waiting outside to go and play Doom again, and they couldn't really get him to come back and do sound check. They even seemed to cut songs from their set because he wanted to finish early to go back over to the internet cafe to play Doom again. They seemed to play 55 minutes maybe. Seemed like the band at the end of their days, Anyway, at the end of my days. So a decade-long kind of saga comes to an end. David Vincent returns. The band start playing festivals. The band are writing. Vincent is wearing a much maligned latex top. Sandoval's back problems become a bit too much. I mean, I saw at one festival, roadies lifting him up to the drum stool, and he had a walking stick at the time. I think he'd really fucked his back from years of playing the drums in this position. And Tim Young replaces him. The writing continues, as we said. They do this show at Wacken in 2006, which was great, really cool show. That was sort of, stamped them back on the map. The writing continues, we're told. And with this one song called Nevermore gets trotted out during festival sets. Okay, so 7 years after joining the band, we get one of the most contentious metal albums, I suppose, ever released. Our generation's Coal Lake. Illud, blah, 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 blah. What can we say about this record? If you look back over Morbid Angel's career, you realize that Trey wrote the music really about 90% of the time over the years, and Vincent wrote the lyrics. And in publishing terms, that's a 50-50, and all of this album really points to Trey. I think should take predominantly the blame for this album, but it points to Trey having nothing left in the tank, being obsessed with gaming and electronic music. You can tell in retrospect some of the death metal songs, when I returned to it to write this piece, are better than I remember. World of Blades, World of Blades is Marduk, isn't it? Storm of Blades, something of Blades. When I returned to write this piece, there are 3 or 4 songs that I remember are way better than my first listen at the time. And if you could shear it down to an EP, As Blessed Are the Sick was maybe meant to, and the very first EP that came out was Nevermore, and people went, oh, okay, this is not so bad. But if they make this sidestep into electronic beats, quite daft sloganeering that would seem a bit ridiculous even on a Scooter record, and it all kind of smacks of a desperate attempt to be cutting edge, but also a misguided appropriation of creative energy. Of course, bands should dare. They don't necessarily have to listen to their fan base and write to order. But there is something of the sort of aging uncle with too much bling trying to chat up one of the bridesmaids, half his age at the wedding, to the whole thing. Mutton dressed as lamb a little bit. And it sort of leaves a very sour taste in your mouth to hear, too extreme, blah, 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 and this sort of kind of vague. Industrial metal was one of the worst, most dated terms you can imagine from the late 90s. It reminds me of samplers you used to get from UK Metal Hammer, or just UK New Rock and Hammer, or whatever it was called, when they took the metal out from Metal Hammer, and then there was like Bush and Hole and all these 3 colors red, all this nonsense on the front of Metal Hammer, because metal at that time was going through this period where traditional metal was just being, just hammered into the ground, especially in the UK press. And Illud sounds like something from that late 90s period that would have been on Earache when they were trying to do the Browning or something, or I don't know, Fudge Tunnel or something with a drum machine. And it sounded like Morbid Angel it sounded like it should be a Trey solo album from 99. There is no doubt a path, and I talked about this in my Slayer Call from the Grave. You kind of felt embarrassed for the band, but there was another path the band could have taken, a slower, darker path Morbid Angel could have taken, which maybe is from God of Emptiness onwards, maybe added some strings or orchestral menace and sated their desire to be considered relevant. But this was not it. Vincent leaves, Tucker returns. And we're sort of reaching the end of this sort of journey, although I don't think it's over yet. Kingdoms Disdained. It's a tough listen. It's 6 out of 10 maybe. Maybe it's the deluge of music these days, and that has frazzled my attention span. But getting to the end of Kingdoms Disdained it's a tough listen. It's a complex, dark, twisted record. There's no doubt about that. But unlike, for example, an Immolation album from recent years, it refuses to give up hooks. Take Atonement by Immolation, a masterpiece. And you thought maybe Morbid Angel, look at what Immolation are doing. You can have complex, dark and twisted stuff, but hook it in. Placing tunes to the titles or recognizing a chorus as a task, which I still think should be an important thing, even in death metal. Production is missing dynamics. The drum sound isn't great. Who is the record label? I don't know. It's not a bad record, but 2017 is now 5 years ago. The band haven't returned to Europe. A couple of live videos I saw seemed to show a drunk Trey butchering songs on some of the last few tours. All point to a band clearly in the last phase of their career. Maybe Trey has nothing left in the tank, and we should all be thankful that they gave us so many incredible, masterful albums over the years. Arguably the greatest death metal band of them all. And we must accept that maybe death metal is a young man's game, and the baton has been handed to a whole new generation of bands. But I don't know. I think maybe there's one more twist in the tail, and you'd be daft to write them off. And let's be honest. Considering all the fucking great records they've given us, the idea of one last Morbid Angel tune, one last Morbid Angel great tune should be, you know, something we all would like to hear someday. But who knows? Who knows? I suppose we should settle for one last tour, an Altars of Madness only, Blessed Are the Sick tour with Vincent and Trey on the same stage, maybe for the last time. But there you go, my friends. My first call from the grave in a long time. It's a bit disorganized and ramshackle, and I will take, of course, if anybody wants to send me a copy of Covenant or Domination on record, by God damn it, feel free. But there it is. Arguably the greatest death metal band of all time, Morbid Angel. And probably I wouldn't hear an argument against that claim. There we are, my friends. Call from the grave, all over the place, hocus pocus, etc., etc. Yasaka.